Hello, everybody. It's John Krask with EveryLibrary, the EveryLibrary Institute. Thanks for being here for another episode of EveryLibrary Live, where we have big conversations with smart people who are writing fun books. We want to be able to celebrate the culture of reading and the joy of writing here in the United States. So many of the headlines about books right now are in libraries are censorship and book bans, and we want to have a chat. Want to have a chat with people who are looking to share what they want to share. And I love a good author conversation because there's a chance to be able to not only, it depends on your genre. And the genre that we're talking about today with Justin C. Key is certainly one that is speculative fiction. It certainly is one that might be even futurism. And to me, I think that's really very exciting. So we're talking with Justin today about his new book. Just let me bring you in right now. Nice to see you today. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's a real treat. It's the hospital at the end of the world. It's on sale soon from Harper. AI, medicine, and human judgment. And I got to tell you, having spent a little bit of time as a patient advocate and with family in the hospital, that human judgment part is so painful and so difficult sometimes because you never know. And the idea that AI might be there to save us. Justin, in the hospital at the end of the world, you're really exploring, I think, some very important themes here. Can you take us through our watchers and our listeners a little bit about what the book's about?
Okay, yeah. So The Hospital at the End of the World, it is my first novel, and it's speculative fiction, science fiction, and it's a thriller. It's a thriller about AI, and it's a thriller about medicine. And at its core, AI versus medicine, but it's also some hopes for technology, because technology has always been at the core, I think, of advancements of medicine, but also a lot of warnings there as well, especially with all the things that we see going on now at such a quick pace. So the novel, it's set about 20 years in the future, and it follows a young medical student named Pak, and he flees New York, which has been like the hub, the center for all the latest with AI. And the Shepherd organization is this big overarching conglomerate company that's bought up all the medical schools. And so Pak, at first, he wants to apply to these medical schools because he thinks that's the way. But then when his father, who himself is a physician, dies of a mysterious illness, and it seems to be connected to the Shepherd organization, Pak has to flee New York, and he goes to New Orleans, which is like the last holdout city that really has rejected AI.
And you know what, Justin? I believe that might be the case. Like New Orleans is the kind of place that could very well be like, we're not doing that.
Yeah. And it's I'm not from New Orleans. My best friend is from New Orleans. But in terms of visiting the city and the culture that comes out of it, and also the unique geography and the things that they have to deal with, I think that they also could see a lot of change as climate change comes in, and they could be in the position really to say the rest of what the country is doing is not in our best interest. So that's really what I was thinking about when I was thinking about where to set it. So Pak, he has to go to New Orleans. That's where his father, before he passed away, told him that he'd be safe. And he joins medical school there, and it's the last human-led hospital. It's the last hospital and medical school that teaches and performs human-led medicine. And so Pak, he has to navigate the difficulties of medical school while unraveling like family secrets, and then uncovering the truth of his father's mysterious death. And then there's, of course, there's a medical mystery that goes on in there as well. So that's The Hospital at the End of the World in a nutshell.
Well, so you're a psychiatrist as well as an author. Your professional training certainly bears on this. Science fiction with this kind of a mode here, it's realism because of the medicine. The technology is speculative, even though right now I feel like 20 years from now, 20 minutes from now, but the ethical frameworks here that you discuss and the human consequences of innovation, I think, Justin, are really deep. What big questions are you trying to help America think through and maybe answer with a book like The Hospital at the End of the World?
Yeah, so one of the big questions is, what is the value of human to human interaction? And our society, as we look, it's becoming less and less need for human interaction. If you think about like the services that we may have, we get our foods delivered. There's even services where people come and like wash your car, and you don't have to, have any contact with them at all. And speaking of cars, there's, even, getting repairs or getting checkups. They can come to you, and you don't even talk to anyone. Um, and thinking about medicine and going forward, I see that technology and AI could take advantage of like some of the gaps, a lot of the gaps that we have,
Mhm.
and a lot of the problems that we have with our healthcare system, in terms of access to care. And you already see it with people talking about, Chat GPT being their therapist, right? And getting having like a great experience. Like you see people talk about like this is the greatest insight I've had since forever, right? So I think that the what's happening now with technology is really ripe, I think, to take advantage of a society that is feeling like the lack of access to care,
Mhm.
the lack of having that human to human interaction that with the medical system, because I think doctors are overworked, they're understaffed. They have to deal a lot with different bureaucracies or paperwork, and then for-profit insurance. So what I really wanted to think about going into this novel was trying to highlight the innate value of that human to human connection, like the power, I think, of being a physician and being able to heal people. And I'll keep this quick. I remember in medical school, one of the doctors that I worked under for one of my rotations, anesthesiologist, he was very much about, we have all this technology, we have all of these metrics, but the first thing you need to make sure you learn to do is see the patient. Like, look at the patient and see, do they look sick or do they look not sick? Like if you just put a tube down their throat, to prepare for surgery, is their chest rising? Yes, these machines can tell you if it's placed right, et cetera, et cetera. But the first thing is being able to have that human to human connection and that intuition. And my thoughts are that, AI is not going to be able to replace that, but I think it's going to seem like it can. And I think that's where the danger is, especially as people are looking to fill in those gaps.
Well, the human-led medical school in New Orleans, when AI controls the rest of medicine, why is it important for the novel and for Pac as a character to have that human-led holdout?
Yeah. So um, when thinking about, this future and thinking about, I think the danger of it, to make it more, I think, potent and real, having, non-human led medicine be like the norm.
Hmm.
Having it be where there's just one place that is really kind of the last hope human has, or medicine has, for trying to do it the right way. And so with that setting, I think that I was then able to create a main character who is, of course, is going to grow up thinking that AI and these technologies is the right way to go forward. Of course, is going to, outside looking in, hear about like, oh, there's this one place that still does human led medicine. If everyone else has moved on, they're obviously doing it wrong. They're obviously
Hmm.
stuck in the past.
Hmm.
So I thought that that was like ripe for having a character who I could show a character arc with, and then also be able to show both sides of it. Like, Pac in a lot of ways is pro AI at the start of the book,
Hmm.
and then he has to journey somewhere where he's forced to think differently.
Hmm.
And having this be very much what New Orleans is doing, the exception versus the norm, I think made it really ripe to be able to kind of have that character journey.
Well, Pac throughout the book is chasing answers, and a lot of what you're doing in the hospital at the end of the world is motivated by trying to find either the truth or at least some better accuracy, and that includes Pac's own story about his family legacy, learning about his father's death. Not to give away too much of the book here, but the character has a real motivation and a real through line in order to find those answers and those truths.
Yes, and I wanted family to be really important in the book, and Tupac, even though him and his father at the beginning, don't see eye to eye, are at odds. But being a father myself, and also knowing that a lot of what I do professionally is for them, in terms of how they're going to be able to grow up in the safety that I can provide and their journey. So I really wanted that to be a very real relationship, even though you don't see it too much on the page in the beginning because of what happens. But his relationship with his father is really what anchors him through getting through a very difficult time, like being able to go through medical school. So going into this, writing it through the years as I've become a father multiple times and growing into my role as a father, it's just always been it's been on my mind as much as the medicine piece, and so that's how it really, I think, injected itself into the story. And then just being able to know where one is from, the origins of family, the legacies, like where our traditions come from, where our mannerisms come from. It's always been like just a kind of a more intellectual interest of me, just in terms of how my family dynamic set up.
I think that ability to have those edge explorations is one of the great joys of writing. I mean, it gives you a chance, as well as the reader, a chance to get a little bit outside of your bubble. So, you're a practicing psychiatrist. What kind of real world experience about medicine did you want to try and bring into this book and to get right? But also, there's some real warnings in here. I mean, the idea of having AI has those moments of hallucination. They talk about it when people are doing their term papers for English class. It'll hallucinate a citation 20 years in the future. I mean, the idea of medicine practiced by something as important as medicine practiced by an AI that may or may not be, they might, is a little shocking to read it.
Yeah, so I do think that there's potential for things to go in the wrong direction because of those gaps that exist. And thinking about where things could go right is technology as a tool, and a tool in the hands of physicians,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that our advancements in medicine over the last 150 years or what have you, that's been the model. It's the technology is only good as the person that's wielding the physician that's wielding the tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about my experience as a psychiatrist, as a physician, and just going through the training. So what I think would be helpful in other realms of medicine as well is having a powerful analyzer tool, right? I think of AI as like the analytic side, and then there's the generative side.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to have like a patient's, complete history, across different hospitals or what have you, and genetic information and history, and then also that juxtaposed against all of the studies that have been done, all of the case studies, all the things that have been like similar to this patient, the nuances, etc. Having a powerful system that can like aggregate that and be able to say to the doctor, like, these are insights to consider,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think it really needs to be a balance, right? Because, for example, I have like Google Maps, and I wouldn't tell you how to get anywhere because I just use my Google Maps, and I think it stunted my ability actually to navigate myself, right?
Yeah,
So
I feel like I've forgotten
yeah,
how to read a map personally.
yeah,
I
yeah,
used to be
exactly.
get in the car, drive a couple hundred miles, and get there within 5 minutes of when I intended to get there. That used to be a
Yeah.
skill set.
Yeah. So it's it's one of those things where I'm fine not having the skill, and it's like, all right, I have my Google Maps, but
Mhm.
let that go away. I'll just or be apocalypse. I will be disadvantaged. But so there would have to be a balance, right? Like I wouldn't want an AI system that as is constantly telling doctor like, don't forget this or consider this, etc., because they still have to work that. But
Mhm.
once they're sit with the patient and once they're going to think about it, having something that's also like, these are the things that you did consider and you did do, but did you consider this? Or there's this nuance that the human eye can't see, but
Mhm.
based on the data that we have, it may predict this like 2 or 3 years down the line.
Oh,
I think that could be really powerful.
yeah, we're entering a period though where the technologies that we have in medicine have been intended to either augment, supplement, but not supplant the treatment. Whether it's a technology like a robot enhanced or even pharmacological, and now moving that AI up into the chain, up the chain a bit into diagnostic, though, there's an ethical framework around that I don't think we're necessarily exploring in fiction like yours. That's in a speculative or futurism space. Certainly, I think helps push on that. And you did in the book move through some of those themes of human intuition and human that the knowledge that we have that defies the ability to define it is still the hunch is a big part of medicine.
Yeah, and having that, having someone be able to walk into the room and being able to have like an impression, right?
Mhm.
So, for example, as a psychiatrist, just sitting down and talking with somebody, I might not even ask like the questions that you think I may ask, but being able to just sit down and see how like eye contact is doing, seeing like how people respond or if there's any like delay or latency or, if how their body language is, just even the air of how they kind of walk into the room and how they relate. There's a lot of written data that goes into that and that is going to inform my impression. Now, also as being a psychiatrist and being in a place where you want to make sure that you're not putting people in a box too quickly as a physician, you also have to learn that even though you might have assumptions from the beginning and they may be very powerful, you also need to kind of earn the diagnosis there. So there's a lot of intuition, I think, in being, interacting human to human, which is why, unfortunately, if you go in to see a doctor and they're spending the whole time looking at the computer and not really looking at you, I think there's a lot that can be missed. And I think that's analogous to like an AI. Like basically, the doctor will really not be able to really see you if it's an algorithm, I think.
Yeah, and that being seen has so many different connotations when we're talking about medicine. The doctor will see you now, but also to be observed, to be seen,
Yeah.
to be in that kind of conversation. Your other work is The World Wasn't Ready for You, and the hospital at the end of the world, of course, being set 20 years in the future here. Let's talk a little bit about your craft as an author and the use of a technology forward or text saturated world for these very human stories. I mean, you obviously enjoy writing in that space.
Yeah, my first love, I'd say, is a writer has been horror, and I think it's been a great way to like explore like human emotions.
Mhm.
And then as I've gone through medical school, because I was writing before then, going just naturally like the things that would come up in terms of like the what if or what's the implication, was just my mind was full of it, because I was basically immersed in it. And then going into it and being working as a professional, and I think particularly in psychiatry as well, because I think that psychiatry still is, there's so much about the brain that we still don't know. So I naturally envision, okay, am I going to be working at a time when there's like a golden age where we have some breakthrough that completely changes, how we might treat mental health or how we
Mhm.
might diagnose or how we might relate or what have you. So my mind is always kind of thinking about that almost from a hopeful standpoint. And then, the fiction part of my brain, and, that horror part is always going to think about, well, how could things go wrong? So it's a
Mhm.
balance. Like technology has been a balance of like hope and warnings,
Mhm.
which I think has been, yeah, I think it's very valuable to society as well. I think, I've heard before that a lot of, inventors or people in tech or what have you, read science fiction growing up or got what's it called inspiration from science fiction as well. So I'm trying to add to that myself.
Well, I think that that's an important component of writing in that genre. Let me just ask you a little bit of a rabbit hole question. This might not have a very plain answer. Horror often has a monster, and the monster in a technology forward or a technology future sometimes is the technology, but I don't get the sense that the monster here is the AI.
Yeah, and it's with that, with it's still a tool.
Hmm.
We haven't, hasn't gotten to the point yet in the book where the AI has kind of broken out of the gates and, it's like Skynet, for
Yeah, yeah,
example.
we're not
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
Terminator 5 here, right?
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. And it's still, and I think that it's analogous to today because the question is who is in charge of these systems,
Hmm.
who designs them, who fits the gain from their success, and what do they care about, and where are they pushing like the technology to go forward. I think that's a very important question. So to answer your question, I mean the hope is humanity, but the monster is also humanity. I think that always in good stories, I think always
Hmm.
starts and ends with us.
Yeah. There's that line from Station 11. I don't know if that's a book that you've ever read or when the show was on, but it said, to the monsters, we are the monsters.
Yeah,
There's something about that. So,
yeah.
all right, I got two more for you real quick, Justin. One is that you have a heck of a bookshelf behind you. This is a library organization. Every library is. Got to ask you the question about libraries and librarians in your life, especially because libraries do function, I think, at that crossroads of technology and access and trust, and that trust conversation there. But is there a library story that you want to share with our listeners, our watchers tonight?
Yes, and it kind of feels like a cheat code. So I grew up in DC, and my
Yeah,
mom worked at the Library of Congress, and she
there you
was,
go.
yeah, she was a librarian there.
Hmm.
And I believe her job was basically to, like, Congress would have requests, and she would help fill those.
Hmm.
So I was able to get any book that
Yes.
I asked or that I wanted, and she would readily, get it for me. And that's why
Hmm.
I was part of why I was a voracious reader as a kid. I remember, for example, seeing Jurassic Park, and it was like my favorite movie. And then I asked mom to get the book, and she brought me this like tie-in kids version. And I was like, no, I want the real thing. And she
Hmm.
brought me home the one with Michael Crichton. And I remember reading it, and
Hmm.
afterwards wanting to write Steven Spielberg and say, how did you ruin such a, because I didn't know how it worked, but I was like, the book has just so much more, like,
Yeah.
data and science, and I learned so much.
Hmm.
So very early on, I've been connected to libraries.
Yeah. Well,
So
I talked to folks from all walks of life all over the country, and the story about the small rural library, the little place in between home and school, the reading room at the Library of Congress is where you cut your teeth. That's really fantastic.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
your mom though
yeah,
was at the Congressional Research Services, which is I think one of the if I'm correct, am I correct?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because that, folks, is one of the most under. There's only a couple hundred customers. It's all the members of Congress. There's only a couple hundred users. But if it wasn't for CRS, the Congressional Research Services, the quality of legislation over the last couple generations and the quality of conversations happening when there's good conversations to be had about policy, I love the Congressional Research Services. It's one of my. Tell her, please give her my regards.
oh, I will, and she'll love that. And she's been retired for like maybe 15 years now, but
Hmm.
I remember CRS being in her email signature. I think it's
Yeah,
crs.loc.gov.
that's right. That's right. That's fantastic. I love it. All right, Justin, take us home. What, as an author, the chance to talk to your reader and the chance to hear back from your reader. You mentioned before about the hope that you have in the writing. What are you hoping for people to learn from the book, to take away from the book, to bite their teeth into a little bit, even if it takes more time to think about it?
Yeah, one thing that I was able to regain in writing this was the love of the process of becoming a doctor, because I didn't love it during it. It breaks you down, and there's a whole other conversation. But in writing this, I was able to regain my love for medicine, or the process of medical training, and I want that to be reflected in the book, and also give people thoughts of like what training healers and training doctors or any professions should look like. Not just the hard work, but also like rooting it in humanity, rooting it in morality and goodness. All with the AI and the plot driven and the twist and all those things and the entertainment and the great characters and dialogue, which I hope is all there. That's also, I want people to come away thinking that's like, oh, like the humanity that's needed
Hmm.
in medicine. I hope that comes through with this book.
That's really cool. Well, folks, Hospital at the End of the World by Justin C. Key. It's got everything. Pac's story in there is very compelling, really moves fast. The chance to be able to think through some of the big ideas in that speculative kind of way. Justin, thanks for taking some time with us today to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
I'm glad. And folks, if you're looking for more about what EveryLibrary, your host organization, does, as the National Political Action Committee for Libraries, everylibrary.org. You can go back to our Facebook and our YouTube to find dozens and dozens and dozens of wonderful conversations with other authors. Dip your toe in on different genres, but also come back around to Justin's work out now. Thank you, team. Good to be with you. Justin, we always wave the camera, and then I put the thing, and then we chalk in the green room.
All right.